My dear friends, I'm very happy to be here to show you the movie I have been shooting from 1950 to 1961. It shows my expeditions, my fieldwork, which finally led then to my publications. It doesn't show Kathmandu, it doesn't show the towns, it doesn't show the temples. My Sherpa Aida, who served with me all the years from 1950 to 62, and he stayed on then in the Tibetan Handicraft Center. My first task was a geological survey of Nepal in order to find out whether the Himalayas are so rich in gold and diamonds as the Zen government wanted to believe. So I started my expeditions in the Terai. I was studying the rocks, and I made cross-sections from the Terai up to across the Himalaya to the Tibetan border and back south again. In this process I covered about 14,000 kilometers on foot. My interest was for the rocks at the beginning, then in course of my field trips when I came into contact with the Nepali people in the villages, then my interests were shifted from rocks to people. I remember once I had a party, attended a party when the Russian ambassador asked me, how come you deal now with these so-called refugees? You have made your name as a geologist in the Himalayas. Then I asked him in the party, what is more important, rocks or human beings? So he didn't give any reply. But then that was my change, the change of my whole career or my profession. I'm glad I have been a geologist to be able to study the evolution of the Himalayas. But then I got much more interested in the people and their problems for development. One of the main problems was, of course, crossing of the big rivers. This one is somewhere, Sundkos in eastern Nepal. It was a very pleasant crossing, at least for me. Very often I swam across the river when there were no strong currents. But my porters were always afraid because the dungas, as they were called, they were very narrow, and the loads had to be upright in the small boat, and I was very much afraid that it would keep over. My porters did not know swimming. I think one single one only of a total crew of 12, he knew swimming. And my Sherpa Aida always said, when I tried to cross swimming, he always said, sir, swimming no good. And he meant, of course, the crocodiles, which I saw one when I just wanted to jump in the river in the Kaligandak, in the lower part. It looks like a log of wood coming down, and I just wanted to jump in when it started moving. It was a crocodile. So the coolies called at that time the porters. They make their prayers for safe crossing. And here, the red crossing, the red cloths you see over there, these are my socks. During the first expeditions I used up every 3 weeks a pair of socks, and very soon I ran out of spare socks, so I remembered in the Swiss army. They were a mountain tribe, very well known. They never were had put on socks in the army, but always just such woolen cloths, which they had a special trick to wrap around their feet. And I applied the same, with the result that I had not to change. And one pair of such woolen cloth made in Nepal, very strong one, lasted for 6 months at least. This is one of the mulpato. You know the names for the roads and mulpatos and mulpatos had quite a different meaning from today. A mulpato was a pato which you could see. It was a trail. Sanopato was no trail at all, and Colapato was a riverbed, nothing else. Here is one of the mulpato, north-south in the Sunkosi Valley, along the steep cliffs of the rocks on the side, and it was rather dangerous at that time. That's another river crossing. Here is a river crossing. There was no Dunga. It was not a very big river. The water was beautifully clear and warm, and I preferred to swim. And they made kind of a raft out of these picos, called locally over there. And they made a raft and put our baggage over there, and my porters had to be attached themselves to this raft. There we crossed. I preferred swimming and having my own little raft for my own outfit. After all, when it was at the end of an expedition, I had all the field books and geological maps, which after all a notice on economic problems. I didn't want to lose it, and my cameras and everything. That is an air mattress, which I used as a bed. And this, at the right side, this is my office box. This was called, we could make a table out of it. On the other side, we could open the whole thing and made a table out of it. This was called by my porters, the Little Singa Durbar. Monsoon, no possibility to travel in Nepal at that time. Outside the Kathmandu Valley, nobody was walking. My expeditions lasted from spring to autumn, but at the beginning I had one which lasted almost 1 full year, and then I got very sick. This is one of these makeshift bridges which has to be replaced or newly built after every rainy season, because the local people were not able to build a suspension bridge high enough above the water level. And here the headman of the village explains to me how the first wish of the people is to have a good suspension bridges. So when I had covered the whole country and I found so many wishes, the top priority of the wish of the people were, let us have suspension bridges for safe river crossing. This man told me that how in last rainy season some people were killed in the floods when they tried to cross the river. That was the beginning of the suspension bridge building program, which was, I think, one of the most successful ones here in Nepal, and it has continued since its inception in 1960, and there are no longer any foreign experts working in it, but all Nepali. These are the beautiful trails on the ridges in the Midlands, where the Gurungs live, and the Tamangs and the Rais, and also this is in eastern Nepal. Chobebamare is a mountain behind, this is Dhaulagiri, this is now in western Nepal, southern flank, and it was of course very beautiful. I had a unique chance to see this virgin country, no foreigner had been there before. Foreigners were allowed only to come Kathmandu or perhaps to Konkani or so, but otherwise it was, the geological map was just right. Bachapuchare. But I was as much impressed by the people as with high mountains. This is Annapurna South Summit, and I found out, to my surprise, that the cultural diversification is quite different from any other countries in the world. First of all, you have about 12 races, not just different languages, but races, 3 main races, and they were distributed in the country according to contour lines. In the lower parts there were the Indo-Aryans, that is the Chetrids, the Brahmins. In the central part you had the Nevars and the hill people, that is the Guru, Tamangs, Thakur, and Limbu, the Rais, the Mangars, that is rhododendron. I don't know, the colors are very, very bleak now, I think must lie in the copy of the movie, because originally it's very colorful here. That is south of Lake of Annapurna, of Dhaulagiri. And these are all rhododendron trees in blossom in May. It took me 3 attempts here to come here to find the good conditions to shoot this. That means it must be months of May, which is not the best months for trekking, south of the Himalaya. Secondly, it must be clear in months of May. Normally there is a haze, as we had here for weeks now, and certainly it must be good weather. So I had made 3 attempts to finally get this shot done. Here we are crossing the Namun La, that's in the eastern part of the Annapurna range. I couldn't find the bloody pass, and the map was obviously very wrong, and I was very much comforted when I learned later on that many other expeditions also failed to find the pass, which had a quite different place than indicated on the map. But nevertheless, these high camps, there were the highlights of my expeditions with a beautiful view on the high mountains. That is Dhaulagiri again. River crossing, this was the Beri River, almost it's the Uttarganga, lower course of Uttarganga in western Nepal. It was a very strong current, we had to keep each other sometimes, I had to use a rope to fix, make a fixed ropes along which porters could walk. So I had always an uneasy feeling because none of them knew swimming and the current was very strong here. For such different crossing, I had to redistribute the loads, because normally I had for each load I had 10 draggers, each one had always the same load. When for difficult river crossings I made a new distribution, I distributed the loads that everybody had everything, had a little bit of something, some food, some medicaments, some equipment and so on. Now this is Foxumdo Lake, where you enter from, what is the name, from Ringwo, south to north into the Dolpo area. I was the first in the Dolpo in 1952 already. This is a mood party. You see my porters walking at the left side in the picture, along the cliffs. They walk over there, and during winter there is a permanent stream there was of salt traders coming here. Of course, the Tibetans could not come down so far because trades were too bad for using pack animals. While in Nepal, all the salt trade had to be performed by porters. You see my coolies over there. Coolies, that was the name at that time. They got a salary of 2 rupees per day and they had to buy their own food of it. And they made quite good money with me because very often I bought a goat for all. They were keen on getting mazu. And so I bought the goat as an incentive whenever we had, that is Kanjiroba, Western Nepal, beautiful mountain. When we had to cross a high pass, which was difficult for my porters and they were afraid. So I said, on the other side you will get a goat, a changra. So we ate all of them. It lasted about 2 or 3 days and then we were vegetarian again. Normally I had sufficient spare shoes with me, but this time the shoes began to disintegrate, so I tried to fix it with a rope of nylon there, and then I could walk about 3 weeks more with this until my expedition was at the end. The longest expedition was in 1954 when I went up to Dailek, Chajakot, up to Simikot, and then to Mugu. And there in Mugu, I was very sick. My porters were also sick, and there was at that time the Indian Army was at the checkposts, and they had a radio connection with the Indian Embassy, and I asked them to send a SOS message. The reply was from Kathmandu Indian Embassy, no time to receive your message. I had to get off very early every morning. So, but my Sherpa prepared always a breakfast for me, and here then I made an agreement. When we didn't walk at sunrise, I was entitled to tear off the tent above, away from the sleeping porters, and they had the same right with me. So it happened only once that I was standing there in my underwear in the cold, and my porters too here. They were sleeping, I'm shouting around like hell, and now we're tearing away the tent. So we had to make this experience only once, and then it worked. They were watching me carefully every morning, and I was watching them, which one could tease the other ones. Then I was, of course, using some bad words, and my porters, they learned this very fast. And I remember I heard once my chief porter and Ira saying, now, go on, more fast, otherwise the Hakim Saab will shout again, and then they used the words little bit Nepalized. But 10 years later, my successors, or the Swiss people who had my cooks and my Sherpas, they said, from where did you get all these bad words in the Swiss language? They said, from Hakim Saab. So 2 loads of my 10 loads altogether were medicaments. So this reporter, he had an infection on his toe. Then I treated him, I made surgical work. And only here I saw in the picture, when the pus was coming out, that I totally dirty fingers and fingernails. And I showed this movie at the UN headquarters at that time. All the big shots were there, and the chief of medical service was there, and he asked me, Mr. Hagen, what is your profession? I said, I'm a geologist. You are not supposed to do some lousy medical work. And then I was, then I asked him, in front of everybody there, I asked him, which risk is greater, that my dirty fingernails get infected by the pus, or the pus is getting infected by the dirty fingernails. Of course, the reply, he didn't give me a reply, but people laughed at this, but this man never forgot me. He revenged several years later when I was very sick, and then he found an excuse to give me no longer any normal contract, but only with limited liability. So, this porter was okay. I gave him penicillin injection, which worked miracles on these porters who had never had antibiotics before. Here is another case. I had an accident. One porter collapsed on a steep slope and was falling down the slope, and then he fainted. And he had some blood on his head, but it was only from external wounds. But I didn't know really what has happened to him, so I came with my choramine injections. I thought, because I supposed it was a heat stroke. It was a very hot day. But my porters, they didn't believe in my modern medicine. They purchased a chicken and sacrificed it together with rice, and so they were praying, and I was giving in the meantime my penicillin injection to the porter. So 2 days later, the poor chicken is still alive. So 2 days later, he worked normally, fairly normally, and it has not been decided whether the chicken has helped or the penicillin, or the choramine. That Pokhara, the standpoint where today is the Shangri-La Hotel, the plain without any bloody buildings. It was the most beautiful spot on earth, and I think it still is. You have just to get out of the town a little bit into the fields. It's the most beautiful spot. 800 meters above sea level, the plain in the foreground, and behind you have the high mountains up to 8,000 meters. The lake at that time was very clean. There was no sewage in the lake. There were no buildings around the lake. This was what we call the Swiss beach, because I had my camp with my family very often on the hill above where is now Fishdale Lodge. Here there were some Tibetans spending their winter time in Kathmandu, earning some money with dances. And of course, I was very keen to take movies of that. But until I had prepared my camera, he stopped. So I tried to get him, to motivate him to continue with the bloody dance. Then I had to run away to stop the camera. At the beginning, when my family was here in 1 year, they stayed here with my 3 children. They were very keen to accompany me as far as it was possible on my fieldwork. At the beginning, my fieldwork was in the surrounding of Kathmandu, so we took them along, and when they got tired, they were carried in these baskets. This was my little daughter Monica. She was 2 years old. She doesn't like it, and our Dutch son Fritz is also member of the party. Christopher, Catherine in the center. That is in the hill between Nagarjuna and Tamkot. Over there is a beautiful view on Ganesh Himal. The air was very clean at that time. You can rarely see so clean again with all the air pollution. That is a school in far west, near Bachang, I remember. open air school, and I was the first foreigner there, and so the teacher was very proud. And when the students were looking at me and stopped learning, he started shouting at them. He wanted to show how much discipline he has with his students. But I was, of course, more interesting for them. Oh, she's a nice boy. This I like very much. You will see why. He just gets in action. There were very few schools at that time, but now Nepal has made a great progress. Where, in spite of the criticism of education systems, there has been a great progress here. There's no doubt about this. So that's eastern Nepal. When I crossed in from Darjeeling and went up the Singalila range towards Kanchenjunga, that's Kanchenjunga in the background. It's a beautiful trek over there on the ridge. It's a very good trail, and there were guest houses there on the Sikkim side, established by the English British colonial regime at that time already. It's very beautiful, and no tourists obviously here. That's a United Nations flag. I have started my work as an employee of the Nepal government. Then after less than 1 year I was taken on by UN. I was the first UN expert in Nepal, and I became UN expert even before Nepal became member of the UN. Now we go eastern Nepal, we see the money walls in Solu district. That is about around Salary. That is at Tempoche. I was there in '56. That was after Everest had been climbed. But still there were very, very few tourists, because you had to walk either from Terai or from Kathmandu right away up there, which took about 2 or 3 weeks. So these are some lamas from the famous monastery Tempoche. We had no language problem at all. They spoke Tibetan, I spoke Swiss German, and you see we have a very good understanding. Now we go up to the Everest Base Camp. Here I had to change my porters. My porters from the Midlands, they were not fit for the cold climate. That was towards in December. Weather was very beautiful, but the nights were deadly cold really. As soon as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, then the tea in my tent was frozen. When crossing into Khumbu from the west over Treshilapcha, I lost one porter. He was afraid, he said, the gods have decided we will have to die over there. I tried to send him back with a Sherpa back home. He flatly refused. So, against my will, they make some jokes. These were Sherpa porters. And so, on the top he sat down, and after half an hour he was dead, simply dead. It was very hard for us to continue afterwards. I remember for weeks we were thinking of that. I was thinking, should I have forced him to go back, but he just refused. So to be sure next times that such incidents would not happen again, I had then brought morphine with me, morphine injections. This one most probably was a Tibetan. There were many Tibetans living all the time in Khumbu. They have relatives with the Sherpas, and Sherpas cross over. This is the Everest now, with the Khum, and I tried to make my geological sketches. The sun was shining, but there was a terrible wind. I could hardly open my field book. So I took through my crossings Nepal from east to west. Finally, I had 96 geological profiles prepared. I had a geological map prepared, but this was just the base of my work. I had collected material on socio-economic development problems. And at the end, I had published 2 volumes for the United Nations. One was geology and natural resources, petroleum mines, water resources. The other one was dealing with the people. And rightly, UN published the report dealing with the problems of the people as UN report number 1 of Nepal. And this report had been reprinted 2 years back at my 80th birthday at the UN Day by Himal Association and by UNDP. This is Arun Bridge, where supposedly this big dam should be built over there. It's a masterpiece of engineering, knowing there are no nails, there is no wires, there is no metal used, only very natural products, barks from the trees and so on, and it was a safe bridge. This was a really safe bridge. There are other bridges then you will see which are rather dangerous. This bridge, for example, that is in the Barun Valley, just a few tree trunks across, no fence, nothing. Or this one, that was also in the Arun Valley, east of the Arun. We wanted to cross this to get to the other side, but obviously it has not been used by people during the last year, so it was heavily damaged. Those strings keeping the tree trunks on which we had to walk, they were partly missing, so my porters were very clever repairing this bridge, reinforced it, and finally we crossed safely. I had a very good team. When I said at 4 o'clock about here I would like to have the camp, I had not to say anything else. Everyone knew exactly what he has to do, and it took not more than half an hour, and all the tents were erected, and I had my tea on my table. Then we had to several times to cross very high passes with snow on glaciers, and I had given some light shoes for my porters. But once we had to cross a steep slope in the snow, and then I saw from distance with my binoculars that they did not wear the shoes, but they had bound them on their loads. I was frightened that they would get frozen feet. Then I was shouting at them afterwards when I met them. Then they said, oh no, on steep slopes they feel much better barefoot instead of shoes, because they feel when they feel the grip of the ice or the snow, they feel more safe. So this is now on the eastern, northeastern side of the Everest group. This is Makalu, yes, this is Makalu. This is Chomolunzo, at the northeastern side already. That was taken in 1956. This is Makalu again. Chomolunzo. Makalu. That's my Sherpa Aida. I used him also as postrunner and some other Sherpas. This is Everest, the White Mountain at the right side, the left side is Lhotse, in between South Col, from where the first ascents to Everest were made, by the English, Danzig and Hillary, and by the Swiss. Mount Everest, Kamsung flank, northeast. That is from this side. There exist few pictures really. Now then, towards Christmas always we went down. Towards the end of the year started the winter monsoon, and then we didn't want to be high up in the mountains, and we came down where it was more comfortable. That's my field camp with my small folding table, and then I was working on the profiles, drawing the maps, and making the fair copy of the, with ink, of the profiles here. I think I have been working here after in the Everest area. Then my porters come and say, begin to ask, to look on the map, where have we been? And says, that's the place where we got the good chung. And that's the village where there were many good girls, and so on. So they reminded these things, and this is my field office. Every evening in the tent I was working until 10, 11 o'clock, because if one is an explorer, is strained to the limit, you cannot leave it to the free will whether you work or walk or not. So it has to be like you need to have an iron discipline. You cannot leave it up to your will. So otherwise you lose. If you lose one day, then you can't remember anymore what was before. This is a cross section now through Everest. What is this? It's Mount Everest. Different formations. That is the eastern flank of Everest, where we could see all these structures. In the Nepali flank you cannot see much of the geology. This is a map, would cover half of this wall here, the whole length of the wall and half of the height, covering the whole country in the scale of, what was it, quarter inch, yeah. The base was a survey made by the Survey of India in 1922, the quarter inch map, which was a masterpiece of survey work, because the Indians, the British surveyors, were not allowed to enter Nepal, so they had to direct the whole survey from the Ganges Plain, from where the triangulation was made, from where they found out where the highest mountain of the world is, but you had to send hundreds of teams with playing table. This is Charikot at that time, beautiful place with Gaurizan carving left side and Menlutze at the right side. This is of course in autumn during Diwali celebration. Then you find these swings over the whole country almost. And these big wheels, of course. That is in eastern Nepal at the Limbo village, I can't remember exactly the name, where I dropped into a marriage ceremony, big festival, and the people have obviously consumed a lot of chang already, and I was catching up very fast with the chang to encourage me to participate in this dance. I was everywhere most welcome. All over the country except in Mustang I got a chill reception at that time because my Ayla always introduced me first to Colonel Saab, Hagim Saab. I was called Hagim Saab by my porters and by the Sherpas, Hagim Saab. Hagim Saab, Colonel from Kathmandu. If this didn't work, he promoted me to the General Saab from Kathmandu. If this did not work, in the northern part of the country where the Buddhist religion where there were Buddhists, he promoted me very big Swiss Lama, and this worked. But in Mustang, nothing. Now here you see Hagim Saab. See, I was in a very good mood, as I can see myself here now. So these are my mail runners. I had to send them, and then about 6 weeks later we had to meet somewhere in the country. And then, thanks God, there were the big marketplaces. These were known to everybody. So we had agreed. I walked to continue my work for 6 weeks, and then we met at a certain marketplace. And in Kathmandu, then Father Moraine and Father Nielsen were handling my mail. While when I was in eastern western Nepal, it was shorter for my Sherpa to go straight south to get to the next Indian railway he had, and then by train to India, to New Delhi, where the then UNDP representative, James Keane, a close friend of mine, was the boss. So then, sometimes the mail from here, from Kathmandu, or from Pokhara went by the DC-3 down to Delhi, and then from Delhi to Zurich airport, and then up by train and by bus to Lenzerheide. That was in the olden days, in the 50s, when we had the first DC-3s here. They brought the first ox cart there. They bought the first jeep. When the first jeep was unloaded here, there always a lot of folks from the hills here looking here, the air traffic for 1 week or so. When the first jeep was taken out of a DC-3, Then they said, this is a birth of a new airplane, this cheap will go up, will grow wings, and then it will be flying. This is Lenzerheide, our lake, where my family lives there. It's still my home now. Beautiful place, tourist place. We developed within 100 years to a tourist center with 14,000 tourist beds. And we have well preserved our lake, is all protected, so not like the lake of Pokhara, which has never been protected, and now you have some mess down there. That is the postman, the Swiss Helvetic postman. This is our chalet, this one, my wife at that time, that must have been in the 50s, with the 3 children. She calls the children, tells them that Dad obviously still alive. Now, that's the end. Part of this movie will be used in the new movie which one is shot right now. I thank you very much.